My name is Parimal. I'm the producer and host of Earth is Our Witness. And I want to welcome you all, people joining in from all around the world, watching us live. Today is, again, one more special episode of Earth is Our Witness. And I say special because every time we bring different photographers, of repute from all around the world, different topics. And the goal, again, the sense of purpose is really about inspiring creativity and compassion that really connects us all. So, but before I introduce today's topic and today's guest photographer, I want to welcome my really good friend and partner, the one and only Art Wolfe. Art, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Great. I'm happy to be here, and I'm very excited to see Piper's work. Great.
Well, with that, as you can tell, the photographer today is Piper Mackay. Piper lives in Kenya, generally speaking, Nairobi. However, given interesting times we all live in, she's unfortunately stuck in Los Angeles, but fortunately for us, it's the same time zone as Seattle. So that's great. And today's topic is called Roaming Africa's Wild. And what a beautiful, evocative, kind of theme. As you can tell from the theme, it is not only about kind of the beautiful exotic tribes of Africa, the Suri tribes, the Turkana tribes. It is not only about the untamed Africa and the wildlife, but it's all those two put together. And what we're going to hear today from Piper is some amazing, inspiring stories and images of roaming Africa's wild, which really is the intersection of tribes and wildlife. So that's a very unique angle. And with that, Piper, big welcome to you. Thank you for joining us on Earth is a Witness.
Thank you. Hello to everyone. I'm very excited, Parimal. This has been fantastic. I usually actually spend half of my year here and half of my year in Kenya, so I'm like dual base these days, but I can't wait to get in my Land Rover and get back there in another month. But I just have enjoyed all these episodes. It's just been so inspiring, and I'm so excited to get back in the field. And I just want to say hi to everybody, and I'm excited to share my stories behind these images. So I really hope you're excited.
Great, can't wait. Let's go.
All right, let's go.
You can tell, Art, I've had coffee, right? Espresso coffee. As Piper, it's tequila and then coffee and then boom.
Oh. Okay, all right, are we ready?
We're ready. If you want to share your screen and go. Yeah. Can you share your screen, Piper?
It's not showing, I'm sharing?
No, we don't see it yet. That's okay. If you can go share your screen and the application. That's okay. Take your time.
There you go. It's coming up. Everyone. I said it's not going to happen to me. It's happened to everyone, not me. Yeah. Here we go.
And if you can go in the first one, the first image.
I'm starting where my story started. My career happened quite by accident, and I was enamored with Africa, and I had an opportunity to go. I'd wanted to go for years and years and years, and every DVD on it, and just the migration drew me. And I know there's a lot of you guys watching, and one of the things with this is it's so hard to explain the power of this migration coming through. I mean, can you see it? Guys, you've been there. Can you just smell the dust? Can you feel the hooves going through? Can you see the chaos? Yeah. And that's when, I'm trying to convey in my stories in Africa, especially like here. You can wait for hours and hours. This is my first time in 16 years that I wasn't here. This was taken about midway through my career. So I've been there photographing this 16 years. And yet I come back to this image because it just grabs me in, because I can feel the power in the dust and the movement and the chaos of them getting across the river filled with crocodiles. So
it's beautiful. It's really, it's chaos, but you photographed it in a very simple way. It's very easy to understand the entirety of what's going on. It's really nice.
Thank you. Thank you. It's almost like the contrast, of beauty and survival, which is a lot of what I think Africa is. This is in the cattle camp of the Manduri in South Sudan. And it's the irony, their cattle are just as important to them. And, so we go from the migration that is migrating all the time and to the tribes and the similarity of they're always moving with their cattle. So it's about following the reins, whether it's the wildlife and the migration moving through the Serengeti ecosystem or all the tribes. And, a lot of the times, especially in East Africa, when you're on safari, you're on tribal land. When you're in the Masai Mara, that's Maasai land. And so and in Samburu, it's Samburu land. And so you see this whole correlation. I mean, getting up in the morning. So I stayed right in the cattle camp, and the cattle camps in South Sudan and Ethiopia, there's almost no words for them. The whole scene that happens and the rituals that they go through every morning. And I stay in the camps and I crawl out of a little dome tent in the morning, and my guys have coffee waiting, but you can, before it's even light, you hear the sounds. Village life, people would think you got there the earlier, you waking them up. No, they're up an hour before dawn because they have to prepare the cattle to go out. And they go and they do all this dusting and homage to the cattle, and they take them off the stakes and they get them all ready, and then they go to take them out to graze for the day. So it's this magical scene that takes place, and before you can see it, you can hear it and you can smell it as they
I love that.
So you can see how the ground is very clean in this image. So what they do is first thing in the morning, they're gathering all the dung. And that dung is then taken by the women and it's laid out and it dries all day. And then that's what they use in the morning, the next day, to start all the fires that you're seeing like in the background. So that's what they use to fuel their fires. And then that provides mosquito to keep the mosquitoes away. And that's what they use the ashes. So they take this ash then from the fires and they cover themselves and they cover the cattle with them. And then they go out and it protects them from the sun and the mosquitoes and ticks. And so it's pretty incredible experience, And then you go
Piper,
back.
I love, sorry to interject. I love what you said earlier, which is before you see it, you hear it and you smell it. I mean, that was just so interesting what you just said.
I mean, it's so excited. You're visualizing all this whole scene that you can't see yet. And then the light slowly comes up. It's like magic. And then you go back, to the elephants who are doing the same thing. So by themselves, they're the ones doing this. This was taken in the middle of the day. And I happened to be going, back to camp. It was like 11 or 12. It was fairly late, and these elephants had come out early from the river and were dusting, and it's the same ritual. So using the dust in the earth to cover themselves, to protect themselves from the environment. And so I love all this contrast that you see between the tribes, their wildlife, and the tribes and the wildlife and their cattle. There's just unison there. And then that goes forth to the fight for survival and the fight for dominance. And that goes not only from the wildlife. Again, we were out in the morning having breakfast. It was probably, again, 9 or 10 o'clock. And we were actually by the river having, a quick bite to eat. We'd been out in the morning light, and these lions start just running right by us furiously. And I've never seen anything like this. And they were going from all over and fighting. So we quickly grabbed everything, got in the cars, we drove out a little bit. And actually the only time in 16 years that I've witnessed a takeover from one tribe to the, see, they're so intermixed. I'm getting them mixed up, guys. But the male lions will come over and take over the pride. And they fight.
Wow, look at this. The scars on the dominant male is amazing.
And I know we had on Nevada last week, but this was actually captured in infrared.
Oh, wow.
And I made that choice because of the daylight. And I probably could have changed it to black and white, but we had such harsh light. And then we had the green blaring grass. And I didn't think that would work. And the technology wasn't quite there yet, but I thought the only chance I have. So sometimes, I have 2 seconds to think, which camera, which setting, and things are flying. And so, you're
Things
just
are
kind
flying. Things are, I mean, you nail it. Things are flying. The intensity of this moment is incredible.
And so that goes, and we lead right back into a tribal ceremony called the Donga. This isn't so much a fight of dominance, but it's a fight between the males. It's how they settle their differences. And this is the most incredible ceremony I've probably ever been to. And I believe, Art, you've had photos of this yourself. And it's really, really, really intense. And it was illegal for a long time for people to go. And I went down, I visit, this is in the Omo Valley, and I'm there usually multiple times a year for about the last 12 to 13 years. And my guide said, do you want to go to a Donga? And I really didn't know, because what I knew this is these men like beat each other with these sticks till they're almost to their death. And I thought,
Wow.
I don't think that's something I want to experience and photograph. And that's where sometimes as photographers, because we really want to have the truth in our images, our truth in our stories, because what I had seen in the captions I had read, it's this really violent thing, and it really is, but it's such a ceremonial thing. They come from different clans all together, singing and dancing and humming, and all of a sudden they break out with this fierce stick fighting, and it really is fierce, and they actually can kill each other. And then you don't even know how it's ended and why. These sticks are just flying and people are battering each other, but then the men embrace each other and they start singing. And it was so incredibly powerful for me, and so grateful I went to this. And one thing I really loved is I didn't know that they had this fancy gear that they're wearing. I thought they were it was so beautiful. A lot of times they have headpieces they put on, and they had made all this beautiful gear for this fight, out of all these bright yarns. And that really fascinated me. And we'll go from that. I took a risk on this. Because every time I look at this photograph, the first thing I say is I cut off their feet. I thought, oh, and I'm going to put this up for everyone to see and for Art to see. But this is a very, very sacred ceremony. It's actually the bull jumping of the Kara. Most people know the bull jumping of the hammer in Ethiopia. This ceremony only happens once in 5 years. So it was very rare for me to go down and photograph this. And I had spent a lot of time with this tribe, and a lot of the boys came running out to me and had goat skins over their shoulders. And they're, Piper, we're going to jump the bulls. We're going to jump the bulls. Are you going to come? I said, well, could we set up a meeting with the elders? And just that would have been phenomenal. I sat there with probably about 300 to 400 elders under a cabana. And over about 4 hours, throughout the whole morning, they went and they spoke one by one, discussing it. And that was incredible. And so going to be there, I was there 10 days. It's a 7-day, really intense ceremony that they go through, and it goes on for 7 straight days. They do all kinds of rituals. And they wear 7 different skins.
Very nice.
What's that?
I really like this image. I don't even think about the feet. I like the opposing angles of the humans, and it just brings balance to the image. And the fact that you're candidly photographing it, there's nobody aware that you're there. I mean, of course they are, but in the image, it's like you're a silent witness to what's going on. And so the bodies going both directions actually bring balance to the image in a really eloquent way.
Thank you. You know, and I really wanted to add this because I think when we can photograph those really raw moments, sometimes as photographers, we tend to be too judgmental for say that, like the feet, and we crop it a different way and we change the story or we decide not to show it. And so it was one reason I wanted to really bring this in. And the ceremonies, and you see is in the cows, the ritual with the cows again. And forgive me on the next image, it is PG rated. But because this was also at the same ceremony, but showing the strength of the women in these tribes. And so on this particular day, we had to bring down bed sheets and booze. Piper, bring us bed sheets and alcohol. So we had to go get this hooch. And the bed sheets, every clan, so all 7,000 members of the Kara tribe ascend onto the main area of Deuce for this ceremony. And they all gather there. And actually we had some Hammer tribe come as well. But these women, it's in the heat of the day. And what do? It's super hot, it's super bright. And a lot of these ceremonies start and happen in the middle of the day because they get up and they do chores like any other normal day. And then they go to market or then they go out for the ceremony. And these women would dance and dance and dance for hours in the heat. It was probably 100 degrees or 40. And so what I did was I used a flash and I underexposed, and usually I would use an amber gel. And that's how I could get the effect when this was taken. I mean, you can look at the shadows in the bottom there, they're almost directly straight up. So I'd say this shot was taken between like 11 and 12 o'clock, straight up light. And just the intensity of showing the rawness of something very, very real going on. And they dance towards the men, and then the men come out, and there's a whole kind of stick beating process that goes on. But it's just like how they're also dominant in this ceremony.
It's very interesting, yeah. Do you see, Piper, a question, as you look at the tribes and you spend time with them, what do you think we are missing, people like us in like big cities, you know?
Being there. When I first started going, you know, it was interesting. When I first started going to Africa, it was an accident. I went on safari. I didn't even have a camera. 3 days into the safari, I said, I'm gonna be a wildlife photographer, and I'm gonna live one year of my life in Africa. And like I could do that tomorrow. And I pursued it relentlessly. It was something that filled my soul in a way that there's no way to explain. And when I was in the fashion industry, you're going to see this in the next shot, but there was a particular tribe that came to my attention. It took me 5 years of research and Lonely Planet books. There was no smartphone. There was, you know, and getting down to them. But when I started spending time with the Kara, I stood there and I thought, wow, I can only imagine what it would have been like to have seen the Native American Indians and their teepees and the ceremonies. And I realized I was going to have such a little time, and what a precious gift. And so I've done whatever I can to spend as much time with these tribes. And at the end, then I also realized, you know, it's not so much different than my mother grew up on a farm in Kansas and didn't have electricity until she was 14. They grew everything. They milked their cattle. It was so much like these tribes. And it's a very narrow window to really witness a life that soon won't be able to be witnessed anymore. You know, that'll be broken down into a generic society. And so I just grasp every moment I have. And in fact, I've always put that experience before the photograph. And at this ceremony over these 10 days, in some ways I felt I failed as a photographer because I did want to be respectful. It's very incredible. I may have been one of the only women that's, and I don't know if Angela and Carol have been to this, that have been to this ceremony. And I wanted to be there. I wasn't there for National Geographic. I didn't have to shoot like this from sunup to sundown because my job was on the line and what had to produce. So I took time to put my camera down and be in that moment and dance with them and drink with them and really be part of the ceremony.
Thank you.
So, and that brings me to the contrast of the absolute beauty. So we've kind of gone from seeing the fight for dominance and the real wild part of Africa. And this is the Suri. This was the first tribe that brought me to Ethiopia. I was in the fashion industry. I was a textile and garment designer for 20 years.
Wow.
So while some of you had your first camera at 7 years old, I was sewing my first dress. And so I think that's, you know, my love for the tribes and the beauty and the texture. So it took me 5 years when I first went down to see this tribe. It was 3 days on hard roads, and we had to bushwhack our way in. We had to cross the Omo in canoes. This was back before cell towers. This was like back in 2009 or 8. And I had went down to see this tribe specifically, and I showed a few pictures. So people, a book had been done, and I was getting emails. We had email back then, but not smartphones. And people in my industry, you know, knew my love and passion for Africa and said, "Oh my God, have you seen this tribe?" And I said, "Oh my God." And that's where the research went. And a lot of times in these areas, I put a solid 5 years. Took me 5 years to get into Angola, and that was only 2 years ago, as it just opened up. So
beautiful.
I went down and I was talking to the guys, and I showed them a few pictures, and we were talking, and we turned around, and they like ran into the forest, and all of a sudden look over my shoulder, and she was standing there. And I was shaking through my camera, and she just looked down the lens, and my heart, myself. And so what I tell people, you know, you really have to have that connection with your subject. You have to be incredibly fascinated. If your heart isn't racing when you're clicking the shutter, then your viewer isn't going to connect more deeply than you're connecting. So this is Molly in my day. And of course, this goes into really, you know, my fashion, part of my fashion career. And one of the things that I think so drawn to the tribes is their beauty. And in this harsh environment, these women are stunning, from the way they do their hair, the way they do their beads, you know, everything. And so there are times when I've been able to take photographs like this with them, and very intimate moments.
Yeah. It's nice that they also let you kind of come into their life. I mean, you have earned that trust.
Yes, and I think it's how you come in. I often have people will say to me, "Well, how, you know, I don't photograph people. How do you photograph people?" And I say, by being fascinated that you don't even want to take your camera out of your car. Go sit with them, learn from them, understand them before you know, jump in, you know. And I think they just knew. From the moment, the first time I went into a Maasai village, you know, when you're saying about city people, I grew up in LA. I mean, yes, I had the surf culture, and so we had our tribe there, you know, we hitchhiked, went to the beach, went surfing, growing up in Southern California, but not this sense of community. And I was so overwhelmed the first time in a Maasai village. And, you know, again, it was before cell, it was very raw back then. And I just wanted to be there. You know, I just wanted to meet them. And I think, you know, we're all the same. You know, you can meet somebody, you can feel a vibe. So I think your intention. So I always tell people, if you want to photograph people, the first thing is to be fascinated with them and engage with them. Okay. So contrasted back into the beauty. Going into the beauty here. Art, what time of day did I take this photograph?
Can I guess?
Boy.
Okay, go for it, Art. You guess, then I'm going to guess.
In the middle of the day.
Can I guess? Evening.
More like the middle of the day.
Damn it.
Actually, you know, you go out a little early. You need to see what's going on in the field when I'm going out and photographing wildlife. I love elephants. I probably have, you know, a million bad photos. I do. I could spend all day with the elephants, but went out early, and this is what the light looked like. And so Wilson was in the car to the left. He was part of my crew. And behind me was Julius from one of the camps, and he had people in his car. And I know Julius, he likes to poke the bear, so to speak. So he wasn't going to move, but I could get Wilson to back up to give the elephants space. They were down by the river. So I knew they were probably going to head towards the river. So we just back up and give them a space. They would turn toward the direction I was. And I simply went from having a 70 to 200 to a 400 with a 1 to 4 and underexposed by 2 stops.
See, so I wouldn't have answered. I would not have answered middle of the day had you not asked the question.
I know.
I love Art's honesty. I love Art's honesty.
I knew he was gonna, yeah. So, you know, again, if we're looking for those moments, and I think Art, you've talked with the other photographers a lot, and you can go out and you can determine whether you're going to find the magic and let it happen, or you're going to say, well, the light's horrible. The Jeep's in my way. This is in my way. You know, we can get into that space so quickly. Or you can say, God, this is really great. How can I work this scene? And that's when knowing the animal behavior. But again, it's going from that harsh contrast in the beginning showing of going into how I can create images when I'm out in the field all day long and still bring out a powerful image.
Piper?
And this leads into...
Piper, are you talking about me? By coming up with excuses for photos? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
A few people at times, and it's always interesting when you have guests with you and their expectations are so high. It's like you go in and the most magical, you know, the lion fighting scene is supposed to have, we're just supposed to turn the switch on. And unfortunately, if you get yourself, if you say, can I say this, light sucks? Can I say that? Then it does. If you say something negative, then it exists. You've made it exist for yourself. And I love that in a way, because it's like, okay, well, then while you're going back to the lodge having a beer because you decided it's terrible light, the rain, this or that, I'm going to be out making magic.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so this is a shot where it looks like, oh, this is easy. It's just a silhouette. But what had actually been happening is I was on the other side of the lions with the golden light. And I was doing some scouting, and I had invited somebody I didn't know to join me, who I thought was a little bit more advanced photographically. And I knew these lions were going to start going, and it was a whole pride of them. They were going to go out to hunt. And there was a person in the vehicle. Oh my God, this is the greatest light. Meantime, I'm looking at this massive storm behind me. I know it's going to happen. I'm envisioning, I'm like, we've got to get around these rocks as fast as we can with very, very, very little time. And so they're staying, oh, let's stay. It's beautiful. And I put my hand on my guide and I gave him that look. And he went, I go the other side. And so we got down just as the last 2 female lions were coming off the rocks. So it was almost a missed opportunity. And
beautiful.
I had a question, Piper. Speaking of kind of wildlife here, and the previous one is about tribes. Can you share your observations about what is the relationship you have seen between the tribes and the wildlife in Africa? How do they see each other, if you will?
Well, they used to see the wildlife as a threat because they would kill their cattle and they would come into the village. And so for a long time, And we still have incidences in the Masai Mara all the time that they're killing the wildlife because it's a threat. You know, people don't understand that, you know, the tribes with their cattle, they're farmers. You think about it, they don't have fancy ranches like they do in Montana and Texas, but that is their wealth. And a lot of people do realize that that is wealth, but they don't understand that actually, even though they're in these remote areas, that the businessmen come in from the cities and they buy from them. And so they want to protect that wealth. And so before they would kill the wildlife. So there's been so much work done in conservation, incredible work, and actually bringing in ecotourism so that the tribes now understand that the wealth of these animals is to protect them, because many of them live, you know, it's on their land, like the Masai Mara and Samburu, to name two. You know, when you go into places, you know, like Ethiopia, they pretty much kill off all the predators and the elephant. There are places they're bringing them back. There's a lot of programs to bring them back. But it was about a lot of people really working hand in hand with them. And what's been really great now is so many of my guides, we've been able to help with cameras. And they, as Maasai, have become great photographers. And the value of what they have now in protecting the wildlife to bring in the tourists, because it's become a very good business for them.
Yeah.
And yeah, and now we're working on educating in other parts. So that's how that, and that's probably been in the last 10 years of huge significant change.
Thank you.
Okay. And so after a couple years back, about 4 or 5 years back, technology had changed so much, and Instagram, you know, coming in images and mass tourism. And I just really long to go back for those days of bushwhacking. And I go out really remote. I'll be going really remote in a couple of weeks. But I really long for that. And so I discovered the infrared process that Nevada is doing. And what I'm doing now is going back, except I use a filter that it stays sepia like that. It was my vision of this work that I wanted to do, and to kind of capture this timeless Africa before it's not there. So I've started retracing a lot of my footsteps and going back and trying to photograph the ancient way that it felt to me when I first arrived. And so I just have one more image, and where I'm actually using this process in what would be considered non-infrared light. The technology finally got good enough with mirrorless coming on to the market that I'm actually inside a hut. And this is the Abori Tribe. And I had gone to photograph Guido. I had photographed her when she was a young girl, just before she got married, with her first child. And when I was photographing her with her child, there was this beautiful exotic girl just behind the corner. And I said, oh my goodness, she's so beautiful. Can I photograph her? And she just sat down so calmly, and she looked, you know, towards the light, and it was just an incredible moment. And so
really
I love having, thank you. So I have the skin in the back to add texture. And again, a sense of almost the animals, you know, it's such an important part of their life, the cattle. And so we're ending on that. I don't know what our time is.
No, we're doing great. Thank you. It's a beautiful image, Piper. What was the tribe again you said? What was the name of this tribe?
This is the Arbori.
Arbori.
And yeah, they're deep down in southern Ethiopia. They're more towards the Kenya border on the eastern side, a little farther out, away from the Elmo, 4 or 5 hours. And they're so beautiful. So the young women, they keep their heads shaved, and they usually wear a black scarf over them until they get married. And then once they get married, they remove the scarf and they let their hair grow out. And it grows out, and then they do little cornrows from the net. So every tribe has very distinguished features in the way their hair is. or the way their ornamentation is. Some of you have a necklace that distinguishes they're the first wife. I mean, there's all kinds of symbolism, and it's so strong. And a couple of years back, so I started going back, and I'm actually I've been working so hard the last 2 months, which is good for where we're at, to be home, be here, and be able to work on a new website. I'm still probably 2 months away from that. It's quite extensive, to release a whole collection of work in the infrared that I've been doing. That just hopefully is going to be like a timeless, and so Africa.
That's wonderful. I have a question to both you and Art, Piper. Perhaps starting with Art. Art, I know you have been to these tribes, as well. You have traveled, a ton, and you have done a lot of work yourself. My question to both of you, starting with Art, is what is their curiosity towards us? When I say us, I mean people who are, from the cities and, more developed nations. How do they see us? And what are some of the questions they ask you guys?
Wow, that's a great question. When I first went there with Gabrielle, it was very early on. It was right after Angela Fisher and Carol Beckwith went. And we saw no other Western people there. And in fact, we crossed the Omo and it took 2 days to go up into the Surma people. And the tribes at that point, and this would have been probably in the early 90s, they were just curious about who we are and why we're there. I think and then I did a book, and then I put them on a TV show. And I think right after we went, tourism started coming on, because East African ornithological tours started doing photo tours based on what they saw Gav and I shoot. And then Joe Vanas started tours. And I think people have really changed with their response to tourism. Adornment became even more adorned because that's what they felt tourists wanted. So I can only speak from that first trip, and I've been there 5 times, but not, but once everybody started going, I started, going to India and other locations. But it was, the very first one was extremely curious people, totally unaffected by our presence, in the sense that they weren't even familiar with cameras or why we were there.
Piper?
Yeah, I mean, I went later than Art. It would be great if I can do that. I bushwhacked my way down and did so many years of research to get down there. But they're really simple people. And they were curious, like, why did they want to, some of them were like, they didn't understand why, why would somebody coming all the way from your world want to come all the way to see us out here? But other than that, I still go. I was so enamored, with African. I mean, I just completely changed my life, and I've chased this dream relentlessly ever since. And I go into places very far, even in Kenya. You go into very northern. I go to where the Pokot are, and Borgoi, and some really, really hard places to get to even today. Or I'll be going in 4 weeks, and I'll be sitting there, and warriors are walking across the landscape dressed to the hilt, living exactly as they did hundreds of years ago. The Abori Tribe has kept their traditions. I have seen that change. They were off the beaten path. As the tarmac roads come in and the access comes in, it changes. But just having those deep relationships, but they're very simple. I ask them a lot of questions, and then we ask if, do you have questions for me? This tribe, the Abori, actually, they're allowed to have boyfriends quite young, and they have 2-room huts, and they are allowed to have their boyfriends come stay with them before they're married.
I've heard about it. Yeah. quite progressive in that.
They still walk around in their daily lives dressed just like she is.
Have you
They
seen a lot of?
very, very traditional. They wear like black leather skirt. I mean, like one of all the tribes, this tribe, the Turkana tribe, they've stayed very much traditional. If you go far enough out.
Yeah. Have you seen a lot of change over the last
Yeah.
10 years or so? And if so, how does that make you feel about the change that has happened?
Well, I do bring people into these areas where they're more tourists, not off the beaten path. And it was really hard for me in the beginning because I really thought, wow, am I part of the problem? Is this a bad thing? But at the same time, when you see areas where the governments are putting in dams and they live off the flood and retreat system and they can no longer grow their crops, and where huge parts of their land were taken away, and big industrial farms have come in and they can't really graze their animals anymore. And then you have the tourism, if it's done right, and it's a very fine line. And because of my relationship with them and the people, I thought to not come might be just as bad. And actually, by coming in COVID, I don't know if we're getting too deep here, but I also run projects called Generosity Project Africa. And those who know me know I run these big campaigns when there's very much a need. So it went right into action COVID, and we were able to get big. We sent 2 lorry trucks down of supplies. We built water fissures. We talked to them about the COVID and the mask. And we brought 2 huge trucks, as did we go out to the Samburu and Amboseli Maasai, because the cattle markets were shut down. They couldn't even sell their cattle. They didn't know what was going on. So, and sometimes I feel like the benefit of that, if it's done right, it can be a positive thing. It's just a delicate dance always. And yes, it's changed, but so have we changed, at first, the Surrey were really, really fancy, and then the iPhones and the iPads. And I remember, people would come down, and so they would show them. And all of a sudden, the Surrey, who are on the eastern side, on the western side, and not along the Omo, they're more off a river called Kibish. And you go back to the other side, and I started seeing the Kara change the way they look to look like the Surrey. And that was then for tourism. And at first I was very closed-minded about it. I was, you don't want to figure out, this is horrible that this is happening. And then I realized, isn't that really short-sighted? Because we have magazines and fashion all over the world. I mean, who here had a Farrah Fawcett hairdo? Because I did. I mean, the trends and the fads. And so I guess they're seeing trends and fads. It's a hard balance. Maybe Art can, interject on that more. Sometimes I feel like I'm being critical and closed mind, and sometimes I think I'm helping, and sometimes I wonder if I really am. So
I think it's a real delicate balance, as Piper is trying to explain. It's like we are visitors, we are photographers, we love to share our work, and it's a slippery slope, and it's a jagged line in the sand. I definitely have felt that I was responsible for much of the tourism in the Omo that has changed cultures. And, crystal ball, if we could only look back with clarity, but you never do. We live in the moment. You can look back and try to predict what the future lies. But I think photographers, not just the Omo, but worldwide, have exposed the world. And I always thought that, okay, I'm going to share this work, but nobody's really going to want to go there. But I was wrong. People want to go there. And so how do you moderate what you love to do with the idea that you could actually change the very people, not just the people, the wildlife, and even the landscapes get changed. So it's like, wow, I'm not that, yeah, I can't look forward with such clarity to predict all the eventualities. We just live our lives.
It's such a
It sounds
tricky
like Piper has given back to these tribes in her efforts, and I really applaud that, Piper. It's obvious to hear your stories and to see your images that you really care deeply about the people that you have spent the better part of the second part of your life so far experiencing and interacting with.
And I can't imagine not doing that till my last breath. I mean, I just feel like I would have missed so much of my life. And I go really, really deep with them. I have really ongoing relations. You know, I've watched boys become warriors, warriors become men, men become fathers, fathers become elders. I've gone to villages there's a village in Sampuru that I've gone for 16 years. And even in the Umbro, I have small children all the way till they're having their own children. And, you know, with the wildlife, and I just try to use it as opportunities to share with them, and, you know, and like with conservation, and I can't imagine not going. I try to be small on my footprint. You know, we're not all perfect. There is that fine balance. And it's not until we can look back in 20 or 30 years, can we say, I think I did it the right way, or wow, I wish I would have made a different decision. You know, and looking back right now in giving what went on for, you know, quite a while with, you know, the land being taken and such like that. Yeah. Part of me says it was a good thing they needed the help. So, but it goes too far. So I sit and talk with tourism boards a lot. I do get very involved in that.
Piper, as
areas that are really pristine, I keep them pristine.
Yeah.
So I go off on my Land Rover like I will in a couple of weeks, but I don't bring people to those places.
You know, so it's interesting conversation, Parimal, and I know you want to interject, but I think we live at a very different time when photos can go viral and everybody sees the images, and it encourages people to want to go to see what I and Piper have seen. And yet, in more recent year, there are definite environments that I am completely going to protect by not identifying, right. Simply because I have seen the handwriting on the wall, and we've seen how fast things can change. And so I think keeping it nebulous, keeping it precisely not informed may be the way forward on landscapes, wildlife, and perhaps even remote cultures.
That's well said, and such a nuanced and tricky point that you both have shed light on. I gotta admit, I had not expected that as a bit of a second order consequence of documenting and photographing things, is that, but the sheer act of a good kind of photographing and documenting things can actually destroy it in some ways. I mean, that I got to applaud both of you for having such a conscience, you know, and acknowledging that struggle within yourselves as you both went about, you know, witnessing something such as these tribes. I guess my one question as we wrap this up, Piper, would be, seeing what you have seen and experiencing what you have experienced, what is the one learning you would have for all of us to consider from that we can all learn from these tribes and the untamed Africa?
The biggest thing, my biggest hope for everyone is be in the moment, be present. When I go in and I do bring people into these areas, the cameras are in the car for the first hour. We go in and we sit and have coffee with them. You're there you know, it's appalling. It's so hard for me. And people have been there when they've seen this, that you see a car pull up and people come flying out of their cars, cameras up and firing away. And to sit and watch that, it's so awful. And what is the emptiness? What is the story behind how do you share that? And then I see people that go on and, you know, put it all over the internet and exploit and are selling. And that's very, very hard. And yet you've been given this opportunity that so few people will, to just have this unbelievable experience. Be in the moment without your lens.
Thank you.
Live that moment as much as you photograph it. Live the moment before you photograph it. Because how do you know the story if you haven't even tried to live it for even 15 minutes? Be there, be present.
Thank you. Thank you, Piper. Art, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, what can we learn from these people is they live largely within their means. You know, especially hunter-gatherer communities, they live and they don't exploit, you know, and that's true whether it's desert Africa or the heart of the Amazon or the mountains of Southeast Asia. The tribal communities tend to live within their means, and they don't exploit the environment beyond their needs. And we as Western culture could dearly learn to live that way. But it will take leaders, new leaders that have that thought in mind.
Well said. Well, thank you so much, Art. Piper, thank you so much. I'm just going to read out a comment from one of your fans clearly, is that you're a wonderful woman photographer and a designer, Piper. Respect for all your associates as well. Well done, good friend. That's from Ken. Probably you guys are good friends, but I picked that comment, Piper, because that's so eloquently described you not only as a photographer, but you as a human being and as a person with a beautiful heart. So thank you so much for joining us live on Earth as a Witness. And thanks to all of you for joining us live, both on Facebook and YouTube. And please do share. As a reminder, check out Piper's work on our website. And also do share this talk, no matter what platform you're on. Please do share so more people can be inspired by Piper's work. Thanks again.
Thank you. Great, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.